Hey, welcome back. This is Pluto Talk again. Last week I spoke about Pluto and what it is, like what it stands for, the key themes of Pluto. But this week, as promised, I'm going to talk to you about how to work with Pluto. So I'm going to be general to begin with, then I'm going to get specific about astrology and how to use astrology and your chart to work with your Pluto, specific Pluto. And then I'm going to ultimately, or rather, then I'm going to answer the ultimate question, which is like, and then what? What does one do with this knowledge? How do you actually put it into practice, which is the biggest thing the Pluto in Virgo generally can offer you, just practical tips in real life, what you can do with all that knowledge, that one can gain, like watching this video. Okay, so in a nutshell, I like the expression, as you may have noticed, Pluto is about our willingness to face our shadow. So it's the willingness. That's an important piece. That's how you work with Pluto. That's what I mean in a nutshell. And so we end up working our Pluto whether we like it or not, and when we don't like it, then we end up in a lot of pain, more than it's necessary. Like, so often there is pain anyway, but we kind of double down on pain just because we are unwilling, we are resisting. And many spiritual teachers and gurus will, the respectful kinds, and sorry, I come from a time when the word guru was way down with all kinds of not so good connotations. So I have this like a knee-jerk reaction to qualify that I mean a good kind of guru. Anyway, will tell you that the resistance is one of the key reasons for suffering, causes of suffering. So in order to work with Pluto in an empowered way, in a way that it actually will, you get on the same side, like he's on your team and he's cheering you on. He will never probably feel necessarily like that. Depends, maybe. But that's not the point. The point is that you don't resist it and therefore make things worse for yourself. So hence willingness. And will is Plutonic term. It's Pluto is will, amongst other things. I mean, last week I touched on some key things that I think are kind of, like in hierarchical order of importance. But will is kind of equal. I don't know if that was possible to do. Will is possibly as important as the other things I talked about. And it's a higher will, like a divine will, like the cosmic will, which I spoke about it in different terms last week about impersonal. So it's not personal, like it's not concerned with your little self, it's concerned with your higher self, that Plutonic will. Mars is an expression of a small will, meaning the personality will, the very specific identity and ego that you are, like Maya, today I am this kind of person, right? So you use Pluto to work with Pluto, so you're willing to face your shadow. Now, let me say a few words about shadow, to just qualify what I mean by shadow. A great book, which I may have mentioned last week, but even if I have, it doesn't matter. It's fantastic to remind you. It's by Robert Bly, The Little Book of Human Shadow. That's what it's called, and he has this wonderful metaphor, like image of how a shadow becomes. Like we just, or what shadow is. Sorry. So we keep stuffing all these unwanted parts of ourselves that the world has not been, very receptive to or liked, or downright rejected or even punished us for, right? So whatever those are, we have stuffed in this bag, and then, this bag we carry with us because, our shadow is with us always. And then in time, it becomes so heavy, and then we eventually we can't move anymore without having to, we can't discard it ever because it's us, right? So we have to look at it emptied. We have to empty it basically so that we can keep moving, right? But in order to empty, we need to open it and look in, right? So that's the kind of metaphor. And so what I want to kind of say here that's important to remember when at least I speak of shadow, that's not a bad thing necessarily. And even, we can always talk about the bad, like, it's, let's not moralize. It would be always my thing. But I do want to draw some clarity there, bring some clarity there. So shadow can be love, kindness, softness, gentleness, joy, pleasure, being, truthful, being honest, being plain, simple in the sense of like not wanting a lot, right? All the qualities that are actually lovely qualities. Some are fantastic, some are just downright plain, simple, lovely. And yet we have stuffed them in that bag because the way we grew up, like for instance, I grew up in a world culture, and it's my experience. I often thought about it in the past, and I don't think it's my brother's experience, even though we lived and grew up in the same town and all that. But my experience was that kindness was considered a vice. Like, you're stupid. Like, only stupid people are kind. Horrific. But anyway, so there's an example, like how a good quality has become a shadow for reasons, not those specific reasons are relevant here, but you see what I mean. So we can also like be so loving, those movies where a curmudgeon, like a really nasty or unpleasant, difficult old man, like in these movies, and next door someone moves in and they become best friends, like usually a child, like something innocent or an animal, and they essentially, this person can feel safe at last to open up and show how actually lovely they are and how they're such a nice person. They just kind of put up a front. So you see what I mean? So nice things can be shadow, and then obviously there are some darker impulses that are definitely a shadow, because we are either legally limited to act on them. Also, our own sense of like right and wrong, we just wouldn't. But they're there. These impulses are there, or thoughts are there, right? And they're too dark. Oh God! So all of that and anything in between is stuffed in this bag, as it were, or is a shadow. So when I speak of shadow, I mean the spectrum between these two, all of it, right? Essentially, the only common denominator, we have stuffed it, we have put it away, we have abandoned it, we have rejected it, right? So that's in essence what Pluto is. Whether you know your Pluto, you will be, if you are willing to face your shadow, you are working with your Pluto. Now, that work, so it's called shadow work, and it means working with the shadow, which is another way of saying working with the Pluto, right? With Pluto. It consists of kind of 3 steps. One is like, I'm going to briefly touch on this really, because this is a whole series of videos, not just one. So to begin with, we know something is wrong. We always know Pluto, always, it's too much of a powerful energy that we always are aware of it, aware of something. And the unconscious part is we just don't know what it is or what it's about, and also like, we know it's something not pleasant or whatever, so we ignore it until it becomes too big. We can't not look at it anymore. Like this bag becomes too heavy, we're stuck. And then what happens is we're too terrified to face it. So the willingness to face it and to remember every time that happens is that really the terror is here. How many times, and I'm sure you can think of an example, or in the movies, if you watched something that, in a horror movie you would not dare to look at. If you ever made yourself, and I have done this, to watch something, I was bored with myself and not being able to look at something anymore in a horror movie that I love watching. Anyway, and it was like, wow, it's not that bad. Once you kind of, it's like accustom yourself, or just takes a moment to kind of normalize it, basically. So the terror really that we are feeling, remember this next time, it's all here. So because you're not seeing it in your head, it's, oh my God, is this the other? And you're making it so much bigger than it is. Even if it's as big, the fact that it's only here, there is phantomness of feeling of it, which is scary in itself. It's not real because it's here. That's what's scary about it, right? So then you turn around and it's on that turning until you see it, that it's terror. And then when you see it within a second, 2 or 5, you are, okay, well, it's not that bad. It's really not that bad. I mean, it's not as bad as I thought, right? So the terror is gone. That's my point. And then there are a few steps that are really about you engaging with it, like in order to understand it, to befriend it, to know it. And this is what I'm talking about in a moment. How you use astrology to do that. But even without astrology, it's literally a conversation, various kinds, and you can see yourself softening towards it as you understand it better. And then the last segment of shadow work with last few steps are all about integration. Like what do you do with this? Like, this is now part of you. So what do you do? How do you bring this? How do you live with it, right? In real practical terms. So this second piece, which is about getting to understand your Pluto, in addition to, like I just said, just having the conversation with your shadow. Although shadow, in our chart, there are so many areas of shadow, like all the water houses are shadow, where shadows live. I mean, seventh house is another big one, where we have Chiron. I mean, every chart has a shadow expression as well, absolutely. But then there are some that are just like full of them, far more than the others, right? So all of them will be your shadows. But Pluto but the way you're going to approach them will be Plutonic, in that you will be willing to look at something that's actually really scares you about yourself, right? And then the Plutonic shadow is the most intense one, is the one that's terrifying, the horror. It's like, I'm not capable of that, am I? Or so the love and the nice kind of shadow is possibly not Plutonic, in the shadow itself, right? But the process is Plutonic. So yeah, so this, to understand Pluto, or rather your Plutonic shadow, you want to be looking at your Pluto sign, Pluto house, and Pluto aspects to understand it. Now, the sign will be generational, and you will, a great book to get maybe started with this is Jeffrey Wolf Green, Pluto Volume 1. So your sign you'll be able to relate to it, no problem, absolutely. But you will, as you read, as you study it, there will be many times you're going, yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. And those buts would be answered when you look at the house. And then even more so when you look at the aspects that your Pluto is making to anything and everything you want to work with. That could be planets, points, obviously. The nodes are super important. Chiron is apparently not allegedly a planet, but in astrology terms it is, at least I work with it as such. And, asteroids, whatever you want, right? All of that. With asteroids, I would only say the orb to be really tight, like 1 to 2 degrees, really. Otherwise, I mean, at the end of the day, you make your mind up about that, but it's how I like to work. So all of these, like sign, house, and aspect, will just deepen and the more you understand each of these, the more specific your understanding will be of your Pluto, or rather, you will see your very specific Pluto more clearly, right? Now, I'm just going to touch on each of these in terms of signs, like just to... no, sorry, I actually jumped ahead. So that's astrology. So now you understand your Pluto. And as you're reading and studying your chart, as in your Pluto placements, be very mindful of your reactions, which is what I'll talk about in a moment in another context, but that's always so important. Like, you need to keep bringing awareness. You need to be willing to bring awareness into all of these reactions you're having. So you might be, is it wincing? Like you go, or wincing, I can never be sure how you pronounce that. Or like you're just having this like a churning in your stomach, or terror, or arousal, excitement, or something, right? A reaction, definitely. Watch out for all of them. And they would be your clues and cues as to what's most alive, because I know, certainly since I've worked with this forever, not all themes are always alive. And this would depend on transits. Also watch for transits, actually. That's another piece. I didn't think of that in my notes. So transits, like, and this is, if you have squares, or rather any aspect, basically, well, square and opposition, they're being triggered, which would be also therefore aspecting your natal Pluto. So essentially, it's every time is just what transit is happening to your Pluto, in whatever form. And if you have gentler aspects and transits, that would mean that your shadow work is, you're much more at ease with your shadow, and your shadow, I would say, is not as hard, is not as dark. It would be, I mean, it would depend. And by not as dark, what I mean, it's more that it's, or that you are equipped, you have more ease to deal with it, basically. But if you have squares and oppositions, then it would be something that that you need to be, it's like sometimes you need to be slapped to be aware of something, and other times you can just be touched, like poked gently, right? And so squares and oppositions are the slaps because they're bigger shadows, they're darker shadows in themselves. So their intensity at you, for you, is much more, right? Much greater, and therefore it's harder. For that reason, it's harder. I was trying to explain that. Okay, so now you have this understanding of your specific Pluto. How else can astrology help you? This is a really interesting and a really helpful piece that evolutionary astrology speaks of most clearly and most specifically. And it's the term I heard for the first time there, but really astrology is all about that. So what is that? That is the polarity point. So your Pluto would be at a degree in a sign, right? The exact same degree, just in the opposite sign, would be the polarity point of your Pluto. And so that's where your chart now helps you to see where you are headed. Like, what is the... You know how last week I spoke about this, the Pluto's mandate is to get us to have all these things, desires that we have, that unconscious or conscious, and both rather, to fulfill them and exhaust them in order to not incarnate anymore. That's what Pluto's doing, whether we are willing or not, it's doing it. And so the opposite, the polarity point, would be the closest you will come to having some kind of saying all of this. And to work with it. So looking at the sign and the house of where your Pluto is, and if you have any planets there, obviously if you have opposition to Pluto, then you would have some planets there. That cluster or that point will be your destination, if you like. One way to work with, so it's like understanding that sign is a must. In the book of Jeffrey Wolf Green, he does actually talk about polarity points, so that could be useful. But even more so, I would actually then research Pluto in, so for me, it would be Pluto in Pisces, and, whatever your case is. So in addition to studying that sign, you want to be looking at Sabian symbols. I would highly recommend, because they would add something. It would be like getting a letter from your Pluto, and it's not a letter that actually says everything you need to know, but it's a letter that will give you some really important clues, I find. So Sabian Symbols by Linda Hill is my recommendation. Google it. I think it's a PDF. I don't know. Last time when I bought it was a long time ago. Linda spelled with a Y, Linda, and then Hill as a rolling hills, right? And Sabian symbols. And then look at the Sabian symbol for that polarity point, and also for your Pluto, and see what comes up. This is how I love to work with astrology. I have a 12th house Venus ruler on my chart, so I love to kind of create these like stories, or it's more like in Aries, right? So it's experiences, like how do I, like just looking at different ways of making sense of things. It's just playing a bit. I just love all that. So if this resonates, I highly recommend doing that. Okay, so let me give you just a few pointers for each of the Pluto signs in terms of the signs, the opposite sign, the polarity point, right? So let me start with Pluto in Cancer. My dad is Pluto in Cancer. For as long as he's with me, I want to honor that Pluto sign. So there may be someone from that generation watching this. I don't know. Hello. So if you have Pluto in Cancer, that means that your polarity point is in Capricorn, at some point in Capricorn. And what that would mean is that your evolution, the impulse where you are essentially headed, where Pluto wants to take you, is Capricorn, which is, if Cancer is all about home and privacy and finding satisfaction and nourishment in the private life of home and family, what Pluto really wants to take you out of that, because it's in Cancer, is going to really get you to be obsessed with all these things, Cancer, to the point that you would just feel exhausted, and it would stop giving you life until you actually start to look to Capricorn as themes and way of being, which would be to find nourishment and safety in public self, in the public service, in having a career, in having doing something that is just for yourself to begin with, but and could be supporting the family as well, but it's just yours. Like your identity is independent of your family, is dependent on your public service, right? Then Pluto in Leo is all about this creative force, the might of self-creation and self-reinvention and just creativity and creative self-expression. But Aquarius, as the opposite point, the polarity point, is all about, so how does this actually serve the bigger picture, the society, the community, the world, right? And so if you think about, so if you have to incorporate that, otherwise you will be kind of finding not enough satisfaction in just doing it for yourself. And so just think about movies and, theater and just industry, Hollywood, basically, yeah? It's all Pluto in Leo. It truly is. They started it. I mean, maybe it was Pluto in Cancer as well, but Pluto in Leo, where all kind of, that was the only the boomer. That was the boomer. Like that was the boom, right? Where they boomed. And why that was allowed in terms of the higher will, the Pluto divine will, right, is because it served the rest of the world. We not just were entertained, which is what Leo does, just wonderfully entertained and just like, oh, just think of films and movies, your favorite and all that. But also we were taught life lessons, sometimes wrongly and badly, but, far more enough times well, that, serve us in good stead, like timeless kind of lessons, right? So that's Pluto in Leo. Pluto in Virgo is all about, so rather the polarity point would be then to look at how it's like, where is the meaning? Like, if I'm too focused on the detail and on my, daily minutiae, right? Then I get lost in meaninglessness. It's like, unless there is something bigger than me. But this has to be personal. This is not about serving the world. It could be, but it has to be it's essentially what I'm talking about is spirituality. It could be religion, but whatever makes your life about something that's bigger than you and like daily, like you are creating that connection and feeding with yourself, with your actions, with your day-to-day living. You're in communion with this something bigger than you. Where with Leo, Leo had to be doing something for itself, but it had to then offer it to the world, and that in itself was part of that soul work or shadow work. How many stars are struggling with that whole fame thing, and that's the shadow work, right, that they're having to do. But with Virgo, it's just far more private and personal, and it's not about anyone else, really. It's just you, direct connection to the divine, because it's opposite Pisces. So Libra is, therefore, polarity point is in Aries. So you have to really, as a Pluto in Libra, you have to study Aries, basically, and try to get comfortable with all the Aries themes and watch out for what are you being triggered about when it comes to Aries. Because for you, your evolution is towards independence, but more interdependence, because as a Pluto in Libra, you will always, you're meant to be in relationships more than any sign. You're meant to find, that sense of self within a relationship. But because Pluto is in Libra, means when you are with other people, as in a relationship, in an intimate relationship, close relationship, then it can be so difficult because the Plutonic stuff comes up. Which is why I know at least so many Pluto and Libras who are single. Like they chose at the end to just be single because it's too much work. And it's true, it's too much work. But the work is like, to do your own shadow work. You don't have to do it together, although that's obviously a plus. But the point is what Pluto and Libra struggles with is to be together but separate. And that's the shadow work. The shadow work is to practice that separateness while together. And that's kind of like, what do you mean separateness? Like, what's the point of being with someone if I'm not asking their opinion, if I'm not being considerate of them? That is not exactly to delete that, but it's to really question one's desire for that is rooted somewhere else, in codependence and people pleasing, in fear of rejection and all that Aries stuff, right? Or rather, what Aries does that Pluto in Libra fears. So Pluto in Scorpio is all about, amongst other things, is about finding power by merging with sources, external sources of power, emblems and symbols of power, like merging, like which is what at the heart of occult is. It's the magic, right? It's like you have all these symbols of deities and all that stuff, the powers to be, and then you have rituals that you merge with them, and then you get the power of that. So the Taurus piece, there's a polarity point, is to say you have to find all that for yourself, like not externally. And that eventually will be happening to Pluto in Libra, to Scorpio people. Not to all, that depends where you're on the evolutionary road, right? The journey, what stage are you at? But that's the destination. Pluto in Sag is all about the capital T, truth. In any, like, what's the truth? Like they're seekers of truth through their own experiences, and that's why they're nomads, they're travelers, they're adventurers. It's like, what is the truth? But what that's amongst other things, but that's like one I'm choosing here to pick. And opposite polarity point is Gemini, which is all about relativity. So there is no one truth. It's just, there are as many truths as there are people. And Pluto in Capricorn is, because there might be someone watching, I don't know what age you are, yeah, could be, probably not, but could be, is that you are so comfortable at home with public life, like being in public light, doing something, like having that purpose that is serving a bigger picture, like you are identify with that that way of being independent, being your own boss, or being it's that sense of that your sense of value and worth is not rooted in anyone else. It's in your work, basically, right? And so what Pluto in Capricorn is asking you is to eventually move towards closer to Cancer, which is closer to home, actual home of family and roots, but also emotions, like that they're not the anathema of business and professionalism and work or whatever, right? Okay, and the final piece. So what I've done so far is like general what Pluto is be willing to face your shadow, whether you know Pluto or not. But then if you want to get to know your Pluto specifically and really kind of work with that, which I highly recommend, then you look at your chart, and I talked about that. And then in your chart, there is also a clue as to where your next level is, and that's your polarity point, where you're moving essentially towards. So all this is theory. So you have studied all this, understood, and now what? How do you? So because the biggest question with Pluto is like, particularly with the darker impulses, we all have at least one. Some of us have more than others. But there is always, we all carry darkness. And here's an important point, which is why shadow work is such a complex and rich subject, and one video or even a whole series probably wouldn't do it justice anyway, which is that if you think you don't have any darkness in you, then I would look around and pinpoint anything and everything, make a list of everything and anything that you detest in the world. It could be literally just on TV, politics, therefore. But like when I say detest, I don't mean just like you disagree, like you morally, and you find it, awful and all that. I just mean like you get so riled up, like you get, oh my God, can you not see? You get murderous towards someone who doesn't agree with you on that topic, let's say, right? Subject, I mean. So, or if not that, people, you might be surrounded by horrible people, and you just have no way to get out or something, right? So what I mean, why I'm saying this is like, if we think we are cleaner than clean, whatever the expression is, then we have rejected it. We have rejected so much that in us that it's now outside manifesting to us in that way as external stuff happening to us to say, hey, this is just you externalized. Okay, I'll leave it at that. So the part of this final piece of my video is like, what do you do with all of that plutonic darkness? Well, there are 3 key processes, if you like, and steps. First and foremost, the absolute bare minimum is that you have to be willing to be consumed by it, whatever that darkness is. You have to be willing to be consumed by it. I mean, you will be, well, whatever it's meant, there's so much work to be done, so not all darkness will consume you of your own, right? But maybe some snippets will be, meaning, this is just getting it's like aligning yourself with Pluto, right? Did I say this at the beginning? I forget. Like making Pluto your friend, as much as that's possible, right? As opposed to being a victim and of it, right? So, so let yourself be willing to be consumed. Now, the next step is therefore essential. This is the bare minimum. But then the next step is essential, which is why this first step becomes then, well, it's okay then. So the next step is to find the container. The next step is essentially called detachment, but I'll get to that. It's not enough to just start with that. So you now need to find a container of whatever. It could be a canvas, it could be a workshop, it could be a therapist room, it could be a friend who's willing to do something, it could be a theater stage to act on, it could be watching a movie, being just an observer of something. So all of these are containers, safe containers, because they are you and something else with the intention of working through and working with something that's dark in you, right? And so I think the art and the theater are the easiest to understand. Like you just are, then you let yourself be consumed because it's safe. It's just you on a canvas. What can go wrong? I mean, even if you smash the canvas, so what? And if you do that, I would actually record it. That's another way, to make a theater, because this is the detachment piece. As you're consumed by something in the moment, the point is to then observe it and watch it afterwards, because as you would with an artwork or with a theater piece, or right. So that's why I think I've done it. It's fantastic. It's so amazing. That in itself becomes shadow work, watching yourself do it, but then you watch yourself and then you see what you're doing, and that in itself then is a shadow work as well, uncovering all the stuff. But even without all that mental work, it's enough that you are doing it safely, and watching it is another way of doing it safely without having to analyze it. But if you're Pluto in Virgo, you won't be able to help it. You will be analyzing, and that's okay. We are mercurial, so that's all right. And so the detachment piece is important because it happens. It leads us to the final stage, which is exhaustion. And that's the end of the road. As I said last week, it's like when we exhaust these desires, they then leave our system, that we have lived them, we have given them life to its fullest by being consumed, and then in safe environment. And because we have done it in containers, instead of really going outside on a rampage of sorts, and then ending up in prison or being, whatever. And then if we did that, we would just be consumed and then remain unconscious. Yeah, remember, the point of this is to make your Pluto conscious. That's how we evolve. And so here, by doing this art piece, you are, the moment it's out of you, but you have given it to something else. Like there's a performance, there is a music, there is a canvas. And that is detachment. It's like, you've done it, but you finished, and you remove yourself, and you can, because it's done in a safe way, you can look at it now. And so that is flexing that muscle of removal, of detachment, that eventually the exhaustion means it's left you fully. Like, when you're trying to break something, but I don't want to sound like it's forced, because it isn't. It's absolutely, like, there's no other way. It's physically impossible to look at artwork and be consumed with it in a way that it totally, like, you merge with it. You are a body that is looking at another physicality. That's what I mean by it's physically, literally detached, whether it's theater or art. Now, with watching a movie, that's almost like you're doing it, this detachment, you're doing it, that's again natural. So you see, the key here is not to force detachment, but to just let it be natural, and or rather, let it be natural to that process, like I just described. But if you're watching a movie, so if you can't do art, you can't do theater, you can't be asked with any of that, and what else did I put? Writing or whatever. Or can't afford therapy, although depending on what it is, and maybe you will need it, but you will know. I wouldn't know for you, obviously. But if you're watching, so choosing things that you can't bear to watch because they scare you, so horror movies or something else, I don't know what it would be for you. Or it could be even just like, if like me, you love horror, I adore horror, but I'm still like half of the time I'm like this. So I practice like not doing that, even though I now still do it because I still don't enjoy it, but I kind of okay, I don't want to get into my story because then it'll be a long video. But the point is you are present with your reactions to it. So that's the detachment. But it's natural. Like, although it could be somewhat, again, don't force it too much, but it's not, there's no need. It's like you're safe, you're watching, even if it's like reminding yourself, hold on, there was a reaction. That's not forcing it. That's just bringing awareness to it. You're not stopping the reaction. You're just making yourself aware of it. So that's why I still think it's natural and you're not forcing, because you don't want to prematurely end something, because then it wouldn't be exhausted. Not because, again, it's morally something, but because physically it won't work, right? So yes, observe yourself. And I highly recommend watching, for instance, if, I don't know, but Dracula, BBC rendition, latest adaptation of Dracula. It's on BBC, I don't know, I think it's on Netflix now, actually. Yeah. It's phenomenal. It's Plutonic. Oh my God, it's so Plutonic in themes. I mean, Dracula, as you can imagine, but their adaptation was, juicy as hell, literally. Like, So, and then watch yourself, how are you responding to it? And that's how you are bringing awareness, which then acts as a detachment, like a loosening your grip on it, and eventually you exhausted it and you're free. And on that note, I hope you love this video as much as I loved watching it, as much as I love recording it. Just anything Pluto, oh God, it's just life-giving, right? It is a life force, the ultimate life force. So let me know your thoughts, and let me know your Pluto and your Pluto experiences, everything you want to share with me. I always love hearing from you. Till next week, take care.